We're live, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda, papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record the meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. No one? To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Welcome to those in attendance. I now ask Mrs. Gibbons to introduce all the officers.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. My name's Kelly Gibbons. I'm the Development Management Service Manager. To my right is Josh Bailey, who's going to be presenting items 6 and item 7. And then we are also joined by Katie Jones from the Local Highway Authority. And to my left is Georgina Coley, who is our legal advisor for today. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We'll go on to item 1 on the agenda. We have received apologies from Councillor Andrews. Are there any other apologies?
Stone.
Councillor Stone. Item 2, named substitutes. Councillor Bartram is acting as a substitute for Councillor Andrews. So is there no one else acting as a substitute? No other, sir. Declarations of interest. Please indicate if you wish to declare an interest, and I will call each councillor in turn. There are none. Then we'll move on to the minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of March 2025. Are the minutes of the meeting on the 19th of March 2025 approved? Please can members raise their hand to indicate that they support that. That is agreed. No one against? Any abstentions? None. One, sorry. There we are. I've got no chairman's announcements. Can I now request that the public speakers present in person for the agenda item 6 join the meeting, Mr. Corbett and Mr. Tompkins. Please could you take your seat at the public participation table. Good morning and welcome to the meeting. I will call you to speak following the officer's presentation on this particular application. The first application is a land at Helens Wood Farm, King's Thorn, Herefordshire. And the officer will now make a presentation. Mr. Josh Bailey will make the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. And just while the presentation's coming up on screen, can I draw a member's attention to the publicised schedule of updates for this application, in which members will note that one further letter of representation has been received, which was sent to committee members directly by email. Nevertheless, for completeness, the email is provided for members in full in the schedule of updates. Officers have reviewed the additional representation, which raises no new material planning considerations and which have already been highlighted and or discussed throughout the officer report. The update also serves to provide a reply and signpost members to the queries which were raised during yesterday morning's site inspection, which I trust members can self-serve themselves as to its contents, and I hope that you all benefited from attending the site yesterday morning. Moving on to the presentation formally, the application site comprises a largely rectangular parcel of improved grassland with simple sheet metal and block-walled barn located at Helens Wood Farm, Kingsthorne, approximately 5.5 miles south of Hereford city centre. This application before members seeks outline planning permission with all matters reserved for the erection of 2 self-built dwelling houses and associated infrastructure. The existing barn on site will be demolished as part of the proposals, and as members can see on screen, the application site is denoted by the red star. And next slide. There we go. And on screen now is a block plan and aerial photograph of the site. In terms of site characteristics, there are hedgerow boundaries to the east, south and partly to the north. As members will have seen on site yesterday, topography falls away from east to west across the application site. And whilst there are no heritage or landscape designations, there is woodland, known as Helen's Wood, which is identified both as ancient woodland and a local wildlife site to the west. To the north, across a private track, is a dwelling known as Helenswood, and to the northeast and east are dwelling houses and their associated curtilages which address the C1263. On screen now is the location plan with the application site edged in red and other ownership of the applicant in blue. Members will also note that the location plan includes the private access road off the C1263 by which the site would be accessed, likely. It is understood that there is no title for this access road, and accordingly Certificate D has been completed and a requisite notice placed in the local press by the applicant. Members will be aware that the location plan has been amended since validation to omit land which falls under the ownership of Ivy Cottage. On screen now is an indicative block plan. As raised during yesterday's site inspection, it is advised that the position of the dwelling houses, including their scale, layout, appearance, landscaping and point of access, is shown indicatively at this time and is not a consideration. The application is nevertheless submitted with a plot passport which provides some further information as to what a future scheme may look like, albeit this would need to be considered under a future approval of reserved matters application. Again, this is an indicative proposed site plan, and it would just be right to highlight here the buffer zone for the ancient woodland to the west of the application site and also a neighbouring drainage easement shown to the southeast of the application site. Moving then on to photographs, this first one is taken from just inside the western boundary with the woodland behind us, and looking east so members are able to understand and appreciate the topography of the site. And the next slide, which is taken from the southern boundary looking north towards the the barn which would be demolished. This also is taken from the southern boundary looking in a more northeasterly direction towards the C1362, and hopefully it enables members to get a sense of relationship between the application site and adjoining amenity. This photograph is then taken from just inside the southeast corner boundary looking northwest. Members would therefore note Helen's Wood forms the western boundary, which then slopes down sharply towards the A49 and beyond. This one then taken from the eastern boundary looking west. This one then is taken from the northern boundary just to the inside of the barn looking south. This photograph is of the current barn, and hopefully again members get a little bit of understanding of the topography between the site and adjoining amenity. And then this photograph is just taken to the northwest of the barn looking back up the track towards the C1362. And as we go through the next couple of slides, this is taken about halfway up the track where we walked along during yesterday's site inspection. And then this is again taken again by the northeast boundary looking southwest into the field. And again the next photo just looking at the track again looking east back towards the highway of the C road, and then some visibility in terms of onto the C1362 looking both in a northbound and southbound direction. As members would have gathered in the Office of Appraisal, the application site is within the parish of Much Dewchurch, which does not have a neighbourhood development plan. Though it is acknowledged that the majority of Kingsthorne is within the Much Birch neighbourhood area, which has a made neighbourhood development plan. The image on screen is taken from the Kingsthorne village policy maps from the Much Birch NDP, which demarks the boundary between the two neighbourhood areas with the red line, and also acting as a parish and ward boundary. As can be identified above, the neighbourhood area boundary dissects dwellings on the eastern side of the C1362, actually going through people's houses. Policies in the Much Birch NDP may only operate within that neighbourhood area for Much Birch, and therefore the settlement boundary for Kingsthorne as defined in the Much Birch NDP was drawn to effectively exclude part of the settlement which falls within the Much Dewchurch neighbourhood area. As there is no NDP for Much Dewchurch presently, therefore housing policies for the determination of this application are those contained within the Herefordshire Core Strategy only, namely policy RA2 in establishing the principle of development. And finally, this will then bring up the relevant material planning considerations if technology persists. I'll go on anyway because it'll be easy. It will bring up, there we go, it's the main relevant material planning considerations to this application, which broadly follow the subheadings of the officer appraisal. And to summarise, the application relates to the provision of housing and the National Planning Policy Framework, which is a significant material consideration. It's clear under footnote 8 that the statutory development plan policies, which are most important for determining the application, are considered to be out of date. As set out under paragraph 11 of the NPPF, the nature of the proposal engages paragraph 11D, and outline planning permission should be granted, excuse me, unless conflicting with 11DI or 11DII, which is not considered to be engaged in this instance. In reaching this view, the application site is viewed to lie immediately adjacent to a sustainable location, noting this is the only matter for consideration at this stage, with matters pertaining to access, scale, layout, appearance and landscaping, which would form part of any future approval of reserved matters applications. As set out in the appraisal, outline planning permission should therefore be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And now can I invite Mr. Corbett to speak in objection to the application on behalf of local residents. You have 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair. Beg your pardon, councillors. Right, I'm here to represent Miss Susan Davis of Ivy Cottage. She's lived there for in excess of 29 years and has always maintained the northern boundary along which the access track is and access to this development is proposed. Such is the width of the access that no permission can ever be granted because it can't fulfil the council's access criteria. And further to that, my research shows that the alleged owners, well, the track is not registered ownership and the applicants only have a limited right, and I take from the transfer, together with a right of way at all times and for all purposes, with or without vehicles or animals, over along the roadway edge blue on said plan, insofar as vendors have any right to assign the benefit to the same. So they cannot assign an extension or increased use of the right to access that site, and therefore in outline or any other form this proposal cannot be approved. Further to this, the applicants had originally taken over land on which my client, within her boundary and on which her soakaway has been used forever in time. So it's due to the lack of access and ownership of the track that this permission cannot be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I invite Ms. Tompkins, the applicant's agent, to speak in support of the application. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This application was submitted following the receipt of supportive pre-application advice received from the Council. There is no NDP for this part of King's Thorn. The core strategy is the development plan, as you've heard from your officer. The core strategy advises the proposals which are within or adjacent to identified settlements, of which King's Thorn is one, will be acceptable in principle. The site is certainly that. The proposed development will be characteristic for the area. In plan form, it would appear as a short run of dwellings flanking a private drive extending away from the main village road. This is a similar arrangement to Aikenbury Close on the opposite side of the main village road and on the private lane on the same side of the main village road near to the bus shelter, which is approximately 80 metres north of the site. The application is made in outline with all matters reserved, whereby design is reserved. However, the application does include an illustrative layout and a plot passport which indicates how a development might look. Upon reviewing representations received from neighbours and in discussion with one of the local ward members, the applicant undertook to address local comments as far as they are reasonably able to. The applicant revised the plot passport, moving the garage for plot 1 onto the other side of the dwelling and away from the shared boundary, and moved the entire development down slope and away from the shared boundary. The development cannot be moved any further away without encroaching into the requisite 15-metre buffer to the ancient woodland beyond the site to the west. The illustrative layout now shows proposed buildings more than 21 metres from the nearest part of Ivy Cottage. The dwellings would also be set at least 2 metres lower than Ivy Cottage. There is ample opportunity for a reserve matter scheme to avoid overlooking, overshadowing and other amenity concerns. There is a shortage of plots for people wishing to build their own homes in Herefordshire, as recognised in 2 reports commissioned by the Council. The proposed development would deliver 2 such plots. The dwellings will be built by Oakright, who have successfully delivered several high-quality builds at Herefordshire's villages, using oak frames and other natural materials. They deliver sustainable builds which achieve an A rating, including their innovative aero barrier, which creates an extremely high-performing airtight building. Oakrights are one of the county's preeminent self-building companies, employing more than 144 persons, of which 116 are based in Herefordshire. The development will truly contribute to the local economy. In summary, the proposed development entirely accords with the development plan, which is delivering housing which Herefordshire needs. The development is of a type and scale which responds positively to the site and character of Kingsthorne, and which could be accommodated on the site without undue harm. We therefore ask that you support your officer's recommendation and resolve to grant planning permission for the development. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you could now take your places in the public gallery. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Thomas is the local ward member for this item. He speaks first and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate.
Tony speaking first.
Oh, she's speaking first. Right, sorry. Councillor speak as an adjoining member first. Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the members that came out yesterday to have a look, and the planning officer for his in-depth report on this application. I can understand why members would find this application very difficult because it's all matters reserved. So at some point we need to look at some of those matters to decide whether this is truly a good plot for sustainable development of 2 properties. The agent has spoken of properties of the type and scale, and you would imagine that that comes under reserved matters, the type and scale. But we do have an indication of the scale of the properties being proposed through the passport, and those issues would be raised at if this went through to reserved matters, because actually the scale that is being suggested is quite large. But I'm not going to focus on that. I think primarily for objectors at the moment is the issue of the access. As we've seen, the access is actually limited to the track, the tarmac track that leads to the site from the road coming from Kingsthorne. And the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 10, states that developments should ensure safe and suitable access for all users. And this application does not actually provide adequate information on the visibility displays or demonstrate compliance with required standards for driver sightlines. Currently, we know that the ownership of the land to the right of the access is not under the applicant's control. In fact, none of the land on the access is within the applicant's control, and that whilst they have signed the significant certificate, that is actually of immense significance in this application. That track is actually used by all the members of the Kingsthorne community to access Helenswood, and there is a significant risk to the maintenance and safety of the track. So the proposed access point lacks confirmation that it meets visibility display distances required by the local road speed limits. There's an absence of a detailed highway safety assessment, so the potential for increased risk of accidents, particularly given the visibility and particularly visibility to the right of the site. The NPPF paragraph 11 further states that development should be refused if there's an unacceptable impact on highway safety. And without the demonstrated compliance with local and national highway visibility standards, this application could potentially pose a risk to road users. So we've got a lack of safe access for pedestrian and other users, which again is in the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 112, emphasises the need to give priority to pedestrian and cycle movements, and bearing in mind that there are a lot of pedestrian movements on this particular track. So again, this proposal fails to provide the safe pedestrian access or incorporate sustainable transport solutions. The unregistered land and the legal uncertainty is also covered by the National Planning Policy Framework in paragraphs 8 and 119. So the proposed access road crosses unregistered land, and that raises serious concerns regarding ownership, legal access rights, and maintenance responsibilities. NPPF Paragraph 8 highlights the importance of ensuring development proposals are legally deliverable and contribute to sustainable, well-designed communities. This application fails to provide evidence that the applicant has legal rights to use or maintain the access road, which could lead to further disputes over maintenance and accessibility. Without clear land registry documentation or legal agreements, the viability of the proposed access route is highly questionable. In paragraph 119 of the NPPF, it states that land should be used effectively and efficiently. If access is dependent on unregistered or third-party land, there is no guarantee that the road will be properly maintained, which could lead to potential deterioration and safety hazards, and future occupants will retain a legal right of access. There is no guarantee that they will retain a legal right of access, which could lead to disputes that compromise the long-term viability of the site. So development cannot be considered sustainable if its primary access point is legally uncertain and cannot be guaranteed for future residents. So the conflict with the NPPF policies on sustainable development and planning considerations prioritizes that well-planned developments are sustainable and that the application fails to meet these key requirements in multiple areas, as in safe access, paragraphs 1110, 111 and 112 of the NPPF, the lack of highway safety measures and visibility displays, legal uncertainty, which is paragraph 8 and 119 of the NPPF, so there's no proof of access rights over unregistered land, and the failure to provide transport impact assessments, which is paragraph 113 of the NPPF. It is also covered in MT1 of the core strategy. Can access actually be a reason for refusal? Well, even if an application is submitted as all matters reserved, it means that details like access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale will be determined later. But the principle of development still needs to be acceptable at this stage. So paragraph 110 of the NPPF states that development should ensure safe and accessible, suitable access for all users. And paragraph 111 of the NPPF says that development should be refused if it would have an unacceptable impact on highway safety or if the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. If the site's access is fundamentally unsafe or unviable, a council can refuse the outline application, as there would be no way of resolving this at a later stage. So we've got the issues with unregistered land for access, which the applicant does not have legal rights to use. If the applicant cannot demonstrate a right of way, that would create a legal and planning obstacle, and we would need evidence of that access. There's the issue of the visibility displays, and there are precedents for refusal on access grounds. These have local authorities have refused all matters reserved applications where access is deemed unacceptable in principle, if the access cannot be legally secured, fails to meet safety standards, and has an impact on the local road network. So I think that those are the issues that we are sort of currently looking at with this application. Is would the development of two houses on the site, and it looks like a big plot where two houses could suitably be fitted, but we know that there are vulnerabilities with the ecology. We know that there are drainage issues for the existing properties, and so that will actually limit the development site. We know that what is being proposed through the property passport is actually 2 fairly substantial dwellings, and then we've got the access issues. So I would ask you to seriously consider refusal of this application as it stands currently. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll ask the local member, Councillor Thomas, to speak.
Mr. Chairman, officers, my colleague here has demonstrated all the reasons, the legal reasons why this should be refused. I concur totally with everything that she has said. There's also a lot of things. The problem with this application is that so many things that are important to us as a committee, cannot be just really be taken into consideration. It's really making a mockery of the planning committee, because we're here to adjudicate on suitability of properties, of development within our county. And yet a loophole has been found where we can get this passed. So another thing we all saw yesterday, again, another thing that cannot be taken into consideration, you all saw the site yesterday. You saw the gradient of that site. I've done a calculation that at least 150 cubic meters of soil will have to be moved on that site in order for the contractors to build these large houses. That is, where are you going to put all that soil? Are you going to take it off site? You saw the state of the roadway yesterday. Will that taking away 150 cubic meters is some 300 tons of soil? To build these houses, each house will be round about 70 tons of deliveries in. Is that roadway again going to stand that? You've heard about display at the end. It's not legal, and display should be, the road should be under, again, regulations, 3.7 meters wide. It's not, it's only 3.4 meters wide. You also know how narrow it was yesterday. Another thing we've got to consider is also, if you allow this, you have 3 neighbours heavily affected by this development. All 3 of those neighbours, not again to be considered, but they're all widows, they're all elderly. Is it fair to allow them to have to worry about this for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, however long, before a full planning is made? I think it is totally unfair. But I'm more concerned than anything that because of the way this application, this consideration, it's not even proper outline planning, we are being asked to pass something which, quite frankly, is unsuitable. As regards the proposed houses, again, which we're not supposed to take into consideration, they are totally out of character with the village. There's nothing on that road that is anything like these. There's one at the top that is a bit of oak in it, but the rest of the houses are all mainly bungalows or old cottages. And I'd say Oakwright's built some beautiful houses, very, very beautiful houses. I like them, but they are not, this is not the place for them. So I think this is the sort of right planning. The other thing we got to consider too is, much as Parish, they don't have an NDP, but in the last 20 years, they've doubled the number of houses within the village. So I think they've done more than a fair share. And how many people in this room can say, how many wards have we got that will honestly say, other than city wards, that that's happened? So I think for all the reasons given, I think, ladies and gentlemen, that we should refuse this application. There's no reason that the applicants cannot come back with a proper full planning in future so we can discuss it properly. So therefore, I kindly ask that this is refused. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, before we start the debate, I think we need some little clarification on what actually the application is and what powers we have over the ownership of the land and what will be the scale and size of whatever goes there. We're not at that particular stage, and so that's not really for consideration. So perhaps our legal officer can.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to confirm, Member, that land ownership and rights of access are a private matter and they're not a material planning consideration. If planning permission was granted, it would be down to the applicant to negotiate such matters to enable the implementation of that permission, but it's not a matter for you to consider today whether or not there are any rights to access that access road. I'd also add that the National Planning Policy Framework allows for outline planning applications with matters to be reserved for later consideration, and therefore the application is in accordance with the NPPF. And I'll turn to my colleague to talk to you a little bit more about the reserved matters points.
Yeah, thank you. So, making of outline and reserved matters applications is perfectly standard and normal practice. Applicants will seek to establish that the development principle in that location is acceptable, which is what they're looking to do in this instance. And then those full details will come at a later stage in the normal way, and we will that will be a separate application where members of the public and potentially the planning committee, if redirected, would be able to make a decision on the acceptability of those matters at that time. Yes, access, we need to look at whether access is something that is sort of in principle something we can support, and that if I'll refer you back to the report where we have done that as part of this application to demonstrate that there is achievable visibility and that the highways, local highways authority are satisfied that that can be achieved. So I think refer you back to the report, which has really set those matters out clearly. Hear what's being said and the concerns about those reserved matters, but they are matters for consideration at a later stage through the reserved matters approval if outline planning permission is granted. Josh got another point.
I probably would add a further point in terms of the schedule of updates, the ATC speed survey that was undertaken by the applicant last year to understand how those visibility displays have been calculated. I think it's fair to say that those displays, the applicant has done a 7-day speed survey. Members would have seen the site yesterday in terms of vehicle speeds throughout Kingsford, and those who know the area more generally, that 30-mile-an-hour speed limit isn't always followed, but the applicant has undertaken a speed survey to that effect to demonstrate what the 85th percentile is, which has helped to inform the visibility displays in that regard.
Right, thank you. And now I invite debate. Speakers. Councillor Baker, Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chairman. Interesting site visit yesterday. I don't know that particular area, and I was a bit discombobulated, I think is the word, having to walk down that track and then be faced with the site on the left behind that dilapidated old farm building. And I was a bit concerned about putting a house or two houses there, but of course then on the other side of the lane is the development known as Helens Wood, a most attractive house, I thought, and I think I've mentioned it to my colleagues. What a nice looking place that was, and of course two other houses on the other side, they wouldn't look out of place. It was also mentioned yesterday about possibly was this backland development. I don't think it is because it has its own access. The track itself, when we walked out of the site back up to the road, it's a straight road you can see forever, both ways. I couldn't see a problem there with any visibility problems. I did wonder if there was a development there, someone would have to lug their wheelie bins up that track, which would be fun, but that's a matter for them, of course, isn't it? But that's not our problem. The principle of development is outlined in policies SS1, 2 and 3, presumption in favour, delivering new homes and releasing land for residential development. I think this site actually meets those requirements. And so when I think about it, I can't see really any reasons at this time where we should be refusing it, as it's only a presumption or principle of development. I would ask, though, whether or not the committee will have to vote, whether we should ask that these matters, the reserved matters application, comes back before this committee for determination in the future.
Yep. Well, it depends. I mean, well, who knows what the future holds for us as far as national legislation is concerned, subject to that.
I should have clarified and said if we approve it today, could it come back to committee?
Yeah. Ms. Gibbons.
Yeah, it would just need to go through. We can't assure people that it would. We would just need to go back through the redirection process, and we would consider that on its own merits at the time.
With that in mind, Mr. Chairman, I support the officer's recommendation for approval.
Is there a seconder? Councillor David. Then I'll move to Councillor Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I very much appreciated the site visit yesterday from the case officer. Prior to attending the site and having read, obviously, the officer's recommendation and the planning application objections, I thought I'd sort of had an idea of what I was thinking on the site. However, having attended the site and seen the topography, it did raise quite a few concerns for me. Looking across at Helenswood property, I noticed that was at a sort of slightly flatter site. Now, I do just have concerns how two properties will be able to be developed on that site, taking into account, as the landscape officer has suggested, the form, the natural topography of the area. I have listened to the ward members talking about access issues, and I fully concur with the officer that those are not issues for us to consider at this stage. I think, given that the applicant in his commentary raised the type of buildings that will be built on there, I do have some additional concerns about the scale of those properties. Again, that will only be dealt with at reserve matters, but it does come down to who the applicant is and the scale of property that might eventually come forward on there. I think, however, that given that we are dealing with the core strategy and our 5-year housing land supply is not currently enacted, then we are dealing with a need for development sites, and particularly for self-build. So I'm trying to take that into account. I just have real split feelings on this one. And I would just like to hear if there's any other debate on it, really.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Councillor Woodall, then Councillor Taylor. That's right.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think maybe as councillors in our wards, we recognise those developments which are on private roads. And I've had a lot of casework from people who are complaining about cars on their roads turning at potholes, inability to get maintenance on these roads, and they feel trapped at the end of them. So we know that there is difficulties caused when access is not clear and hasn't been decided. So we would have to trust that the developers, or the applicants in this case, would work out some sort of arrangement with the neighbours to make sure that they can get their trucks down there. Yesterday when we were on the site, I noticed that there were some heavy tyre marks on one side of the one of the verges. It looks like a tractor or something had gone onto the grass and carved it up a bit. So you can see that the width of that path was insufficient for large vehicles or heavy goods vehicles, which would be required for demolition and for construction, as councillors, as the ward members were describing, when it comes to shifting the work that's going to be required in there. So it is difficult, because the other thing is I do support self-builds, and it is a lovely piece of land with fantastic views, and to have local employers involved in building this. We are building our own capacity in Herefordshire to deliver more housing. So as a principle, I would support it, but I think in future they are holding up a lot of problems unless they have that access resolved in reserve matters. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
I agree with Councillor Wall and Councillor Simmons regarding the issues on site. I have grave concerns with regards to movement of soil and effects on the ancient woodland, and also concerns with regards to suds and foul water with regards to the effects on the ancient woodland as well. Again, I agree with concerns with regards to the road, potholes, lack of maintenance. It is an ongoing problem that I have seen in communities that I have had discussions with, and I think that is a real serious problem that is usually not resolved. I agree that we do need to have self-builds, and they do tend to be a better build, and people do tend to stay once they have had their self-builds finished. Completion, I'm concerned with regards to how long the self-builds can take, and also the effects that it has on the local residents with vehicles and diggers causing noise and problems with regards to getting up and down the lane. So if we have one plot completed before another plot, my concerns would be with regards to access. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there a speaker? Oh, Councillor Engel.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is a case where some kind of houses will be built by some kind of person in some kind of way, but we can't know what they are. So it's virtually impossible to make any kind of reasonable decision. I would just want to make one point, which is something that I think is going to be increasingly important and increasingly concerning when rural property is being discussed in the future, and indeed urban property as well. The purpose of this government policy, to which we have to adhere, is that the idea is to build the houses that the area needs. And if, as it seems, this is going to be one of those cases where a house that's unaffordable by members of the community, houses that will be unaffordable to members of the community, and also in this case out of scale with the properties around them. I think that we need to try and take that into account, and this is going to, however long this committee lasts, this is going to be, I think, the major problem of our time, and I would urge the proponents of this to go away and consider that, and build something that is in scale with the houses around it, the scenery beyond, and the needs of the community. Thank you.
Can I say, can we be very careful here? We're not considering what is going on there. We're considering the principle of something going on there. And, you know, the danger is we're getting into the point of saying, you know, we might find that the applicant comes forward with half a dozen starter homes or etc. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility. But anyway, Councillor Gibbons. I mean, Mrs. Gibbons.
That's a no. Yeah, so just to clarify that, this is an application for up to 2, or for 2, so there won't be half a dozen. But in terms of this application, in terms of, I've got a suggestion, just thinking about it. So we've got condition 5 on this, which is recommended in terms of construction management plan. And I think it's probably something that we could add to to this is a soil management plan or a spoil management plans or waste management plan type condition, so that we can control how that soil movement happens as part of that construction management plan. If those that are proposing it would like to have a think about maybe adding an additional part to that condition, I think that might be a sensible option to listening to the concerns.
Is Councillor Davis?
I think it's eminently sensible from Ms Gibbons.
And Councillor...
Totally agree, Chair. Yeah.
Yep. Speakers? There are none. We have a proposal before us as outlined, plus an addendum. Can I now, any officer comments before we move to the local members? None? Then I'll go first, as in the order that it was initially. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the debate. I think somebody in the debate mentioned trust, and I'm not entirely sure that trust comes into planning issues, because we all know that we've trusted that in reserved matters things will be resolved, and often residents are told that, you know, in reserved matters you'll be able to deal with this, and that just simply does not happen. It does not happen, and it depends really on what the applicant wants to put forward. And we can see from this application that, you know, what is being put forward. These are not houses, as Councillor Engel said, that the community needs. What we need is affordable housing. We need houses that rural young people can actually move into. That's the sort of housing that we need. Fine, these types of houses may have an impact on the economy, but actually I think you need to bear that in mind alongside the impact on the ancient woodland, the impact on the path. And I refer back to MT1 within the core strategy, which claims that we need to protect existing local footways. This is an existing local footway. Who is going to maintain that footway? Who is going to maintain that access? It's just really not clear. I can see that Councillor Thomas, for as long as he is a councillor, will have numerous complaints about that footway and the state of it, and somebody will be demanding that the council sort it out. Well, it's obviously not the council's responsibility. I refer back to the fact that actually the splays have not actually been properly addressed, and that the consultation from highways actually happened prior to the land ownership issues, to the right of the access coming out of the site. Before that access was clarified, I accept that that is possibly a civil issue, but again, planning policy does ask us to refer back to safe access as one of the underpinning sort of criteria for any planning development. Can you get in and out of that access safely, and are the splays right? And while it was very quiet while we were there yesterday, I can assure you that when the school run happens, it's an extremely busy road. Yeah, I think that's basically covered the issues. I still find it very difficult to determine exactly what we can object to in an application like this. But again, referring back to the National Planning Policy Framework, there are very strict criteria about visibility displays, safety, safe access, and ownership. So I'm not entirely sure why we don't hold that much sway to it in Herefordshire, but actually these are, in our rural areas, these are really, really important issues. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, these are being sold to us as self-build, well, I know how much work goes into Oakwright House, and you certainly would never self-build. To me, self-build, or in the building profession, self-build is classed as a bricklayer or a carpenter or whoever will take on the construction himself, bringing in his friends to assist. So this is not a self-build at all. The houses, as several people have said about the houses, these are not the sort of houses that we want in Massachusetts Parish, Kingsthorne Village, or anything else. They're not going to serve. They're going to be, again, we know, we keep saying we're not supposed to take these things into consideration, but we do really have to take it. A final suggestion was from Ms. Gibbons. CDM. Well, I've operated under many CDMs. In fact, I was a CDM adjudicator. But building companies do not comply with them at all. They just don't they give lip service to them. And the only time, if they think that they're going to have an accident, is the only time they ever really take note of them. So, you know, applying CDM to the site, which that scale of site has to have CDM anyway, is absolutely right. So I really do think I think my colleague and I have given you plenty of reasons to turn this down. And we respectfully ask that this is rejected.
Can I say that I've never heard so much irrelevance. We're dealing with the principle here. We cannot take into account the ownership. We cannot, in this matter, take into account what might happen there, because it's not relevant at this particular stage of the planning application. And to do so would lend us open to judicial review. And we would lose it, I can tell you now. Ms. Gibbons.
Just some reassurance really on the construction management plan condition. It's slightly different to what Councillor Thomas is referring to, in that it does allow us, if they submit details of how they're going to manage something, or manage the site and where they're going to site things and how they're going to operate on the site, that's a condition. So if we will consider the details that have been submitted, and we will, if there is a breach of that condition, then obviously that gives us opportunity to consider enforcement on that or remind them of their requirements. So it's just, we often do get sort of safety style other documents submitted for that, but we always go back and get what we require to give that assurance for how that site will operate as part of the planning and the build process outside of other legislation. And we do find it quite a useful document to ensure that there aren't things like soil spoil piles around the site, or times that they might operate coming in and out of the site, so avoid busy peak times, that sort of thing. We'll consider that detail when it arrives, but we can seek to secure a little bit more information that's about the actual site and how that operates at the time. So just to give that assurance on that condition.
Right. We have a proposal in front of us. Can I ask now, those in favour, please show. Those against? 1. Abstentions? 2 abstentions. That is carried. Ask for a 10-minute break while we change over not Right, thank you. We'll now move to the second application, which is the 7 Blackfriars Street. Proposed change of use from a single dwelling house to four number apartments for the use of as accommodation for transitional temporary accommodation to demolish the existing detached garage to site a bespoke container converted for the use as accommodation for a transitional temporary accommodation and associated operational development. Can I the public speakers, Mr. Rowe and Ms. McSherry, please take their places at the public gallery at the front for public speakers, in front of the microphones. Thank you. I'll invite you to speak after the officer has made their presentation. Welcome to the meeting. Thank you. Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, Chairman. On double duty this morning. Just before beginning the presentation for this application, thank you to members who were able to come and visit the site yesterday morning, which I hope, as always, you found very beneficial. And following on from the queries that were raised during yesterday's site inspection, I draw your attention to the publicised schedule of updates. Just to note, there have been no further representations, and following the queries that were raised during the livability and the proposed visualisation of the container, the applicant has provided a short response to this. And in light of this response and ensuring adequate amenity and livability for future occupiers in terms of the accommodation proposed, can I draw a member's attention to the revised officer recommendation with the additional condition that prior to first occupation of the container as transitional temporary accommodation, an updated proposed floor plan or photographic evidence to confirm the installation of the bedroom, kitchen, living area and bathroom shower area for future occupiers is submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. On that understanding then, I will move formally on to the presentation, in which 7 Blackfriars Street is a semi-detached Victorian property with detached garage located to the south of Blackfriars Street, Hereford, as denoted by the red star on screen. As you've heard from the Chairman, this application seeks full planning permission from the change of use of one dwelling house into 4 apartments intended to support individuals who require transitional temporary accommodation. The application also proposes the demolition of a garage to site a bespoke container which will be converted for a single occupant to be used as transitional temporary accommodation. There are no other external alterations proposed aside from associated operational development to include the installation of cycle stands to the immediate north of the container's proposed siting, as well as a proposed ramp which would be attached to 7 Blackfriars Street and provision made for refuse and recycling. As you can see from the block plan and the aerial photograph on screen, as members who were able to join us on site yesterday, in terms of characteristics, to the north of the site is a hotel and its associated access road taken from Blackfriars Street with the M-Night campus to the northeast. To the south is an extended compound housing and electricity substation. To the immediate east at number 6 is a hearing clinic, and to the west is a deliveries and emergency access road which leads on to the ground floor car park associated with the Old Market shopping centre. This is the location plan with the application site edged in red and other ownership of the applicant in blue. And the next slide, which will then bring up the existing and the proposed block plans, which is in the top left and bottom right respectively. And then we'll fly through these now. This is just the existing elevations of the dwelling house and the garage. And then this moves then onto the proposed dwelling house elevations and that of the container. Then the proposed floor plans to show how each apartment and the container would be serviced in terms of its amenities, which would be amended, as you had heard, by the way of the additional condition as proposed in the schedule of updates. And then just a selection of photos for those who were unable to join us yesterday morning. Starting off with a photograph which is taken from Blackfriars Street looking southeast towards the application site, noting that of the relationship with number 6 to the left with the contemporary side extension, and also noting the Old Market buildings you can see to the rear on the right. This photograph just taken a little further west along Blackfriars Street, again looking southeast towards the application site and the other 2 pairs of semi-detached properties along Blackfriars Street. This is just then taken from the west looking east, which is just outside the western boundary on the emergency access road. And then this photo just taken from outside the southwestern boundary, looking directly northeast in terms of the relationship with the hotel and the M Night campus. This is just taken from inside the northern boundary, where we were largely yesterday, looking south directly towards the garage. And this is just taken a little bit along, again outside the northern boundary, looking southwest towards the old market units. And this again is just taken from outside the northern boundary, looking southeast again with number 6. And finally, this photograph, as we did walk down the Blackfriars Street, so members were able to appreciate the relationship with that of number 6. So this is taken looking southwest towards number 6 and number 7. On screen, and just for members' reference, is to note the extent of the Hereford Central Conservation Area, which is filled in red, to which members will note that the application site lies outside of the conservation area, which I've denoted there by the black circle. And then finally on screen are the relevant material planning considerations, which broadly correlate with the officer report appraisal subheadings. And to summarise, at the time of considering this application, the policies most relevant to the determination of this application are considered to be out of date, applying the tilted balance in favour of sustainable development and engaging paragraph 11D of the NPPF. The proposal appropriately demonstrates that, subject to conditions as recommended in the officer report as amended by the schedule of updates, it would not result in a detrimental impact upon the character and appearance of the area, the living conditions of existing and future residents or occupiers, highway safety, drainage, flood risk, heritage or ecology and biodiversity. The use of the site as transitional temporary accommodation is not prevented by the adopted development plan, with a number of nearby approved applications in recent years, including at number 3 for the same change of use as that sought here, and at number 4 and 5 for the use as accommodation for vulnerable adults in association with strategic housing initiatives. In light that paragraph 11DI or 11DII are not engaged, planning permission should therefore be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now can I invite Mr. Rowe, a local resident, to speak in objection to the application. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Scott Rowe and I own and operate a hearing practice at 6 Blackfriars Street, adjoining number 7, the property in this application. Let me say from the outset, I understand that number 7 is in very poor condition. If this council is committed to improving and providing quality housing, that's a positive step. My concern is that the principle of renovation is, my concern is not with the principle of renovation, it's with how this particular application has been handled and what's actually being proposed. First, I want to raise the issue of the shipping container. I was alarmed and learned that this would be used as a residential unit. Sorry. Even Hereford City Council has objected to it, rightly pointing out that a container is simply not suitable for human habitation. It's uncomfortable, unsightly, and completely out of character in this location. This element of this proposal should be removed. Second, as a healthcare provider, I'm deeply concerned about soundproofing. My clinic delivers hearing tests and medical consultations to elderly patients and those with sensory needs, all of which require a quiet and stable environment. Without proper acoustic barrier between the new flats and our premises, it will become very difficult for us to operate. Sound insulation must be made a condition of any approval. And finally, there's been no clarity around who will manage or monitor the site. We've seen other nearby properties converted into bedsits with no visible oversight. I have had no communication about how security will be handled, who will contact if there are any issues, which is worrying when your next door neighbour is a vulnerable facing business like mine. In fact, I only learned about this application through the Hereford Times, not through any direct contact from the council. That lack of consultation is disappointing. I'm not here to say don't renovate the building. I'm here to say do it properly. Remove the shipping container, include mandatory soundproofing and provide a clear management plan. These are fair, practical measures, and if they're met, I believe the site can be improved for everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And now I invite Ms. Rowe, McSherry, to speak, and the applicant to speak in support of the application.
Good morning and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name's Hannah McSherry and I manage the strategic housing team at Herefordshire Council. To give context for this application, the Council are currently accommodating more than 160 households in temporary accommodation and more than 20 households in transitional accommodation. We also have over 1,000 people registered or in the process of registering on HomePoint, our choice-based letting system for social housing in Herefordshire. The Council have spent £3.5 million on housing solutions, including temporary accommodation, last year. Demand for housing is significant and continues to outstrip supply. Our application to convert this property into 4 self-contained units is in line with the people and place ambitions of the Council's plan. This property is centrally located on a residential street and is ideally placed for people needing to access essential services, education, volunteering and work opportunities. The building, which was previously an HMO, has been vacant for some time and is in need of renovation. The proposed refurbishment will enhance both the building and its immediate vicinity. The property will provide much needed accessible accommodation on the ground floor, and residents will receive support from the Council's housing service and help them to realise their potential, feel safe and be supported. The Council owns other residential properties in the street which are well managed and supported by a registered provider of social housing, a model which we are keen to replicate. The placement of a self-contained modular building within the curtilage of this property would enable the Council to deliver another much-needed unit of accessible accommodation. The exact specification for the modular building has yet to be finalised, but as well as being accessible, the specifications being considered all meet with building regulations, with acoustic and thermal insulation levels that exceed regulations. I want to reassure the committee that whatever supplier we select, the accommodation will not look like or feel like a container. It will look and feel like a modern, safe and warm small home and include a kitchenette and shower room. The use of innovative modular construction for affordable housing is supported by Homes England and highlighted by the Local Government Association as a cost-effective and efficient way of providing high-quality, flexible housing solutions for people in need. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I invite debate. Oh, sorry, public gallery. If you could go back to the public gallery, thank you. Member is Councillor Andrews. Right. Can I now ask for...
Thank you, and thank the officers for their report and speakers in the public gallery and councillors for being at the site yesterday. I was contacted in relation to this development. I'm not actually the ward member, but it is adjacent to my ward. Applications like this are really important to me. Most people probably don't know that I was homeless at one point with my kids. And provision for anyone who needs housing at times of distress, or in this case care leavers going out on their first stage out into the world. I do think this is really important to provide safe housing for them. Another thing is that it's bringing a vacant property back into use. And as we've heard, that it isn't a container, so the concerns from the City Council, I think, can be allayed that it will be a modular building with bedroom, kitchen, bathroom and living area and not just a container. And as we've heard, there are issues with homelessness and housing within Herefordshire, so anything that council can do to support that I think is really important. I have been looking through the report, and if we look at amenity, so it's 6.4 in the report, it does say, in order to ensure that noise disruption to the business is mitigated, the applicant intends to appoint a specialist provider to carry out a UCAS accredited sound test prior to the works commencing. And I understand from that that there could be sound insulation improvements employed. So I do hope that that allays any other fears as well. So if I'm allowed to, could I propose that we accept the application? Is that allowed?
Seconder, Councillor Woodall. But let's go on. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleague for sharing her lived experience of homelessness. I think it's really brave and very important, so thank you for doing that. I've listened to what the objector living next door has said, and I do understand his concerns. And until the update came through, I shared his concerns regarding the shipping container as it was denoted in the planning application. And I am very relieved to hear from the applicant today and in the schedule of updates that was sent through that this is a different type of building, and there is a condition or amendment there to ensure that that details are submitted. So that's reassured me greatly on that respect. Yes, I can see that there's the building regulation, fully compliant with building regulations sound test to be done by UCAS accredited service, which I welcome. I mean, I would just add this house was previously an unlicensed HMO, which must have caused some issues there. I would say that with separate apartments within the building, there is no communal area, so you're unlikely to get significant noise from gatherings of people where there is no communal area. That would definitely help in that respect, so I hope that gives some reassurance. I think this is otherwise a really good location for sort of town centre where people are unlikely in this situation to have access to vehicles in terms of car, that they can walk and access employment and services that they need. So I am fully supportive of this application.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an attractive old building. It looks Edwardian to me, and it was probably built as a pair of semis originally, which means because they built quite good quality properties in those days, there's probably adequate sound insulation between the two already, but the fact that they're going to go in and double check is encouraging. I think it's very naive of the City Council to assume that we're going to put people in containers. It was such a bad word, and it should never be used again, I would ask our planners. A prefab, maybe, and they were extremely popular back in the 50s, weren't they? I think City Council need to have a think about their objection facility or their policies. I've got no problems with this at all. Are the people next door, the business next door, are they assuming somehow that the residents are going to be noisy, horrible vandals and what have you, having noisy parties? That's not necessarily the case, as Councillor Simmons quite rightly pointed out. These are small self-contained units, and I certainly support this application and will be voting to approve. Thank you.
I would say, in defence of the City Council, the actual planning application actually says bespoke container. So, can I now Davis and then Councillor Hamblin?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, and thank you for the public input there. It's a really good use, I believe, of this facility, and to improve it and to bring it back into a very essential item that can be used for by vulnerable people is key to this. I was concerned over the use of the term shipping container, and my background for that is having served in the military and spent many times abroad, and having lived in Corrimex and container type facilities, they've been really good. And from the freezing weather in Kosovo to red hot weather in Afghanistan and in Iraq, where I've lived in these containers, they are really good. So consequently, the point I'm trying to make is that these facilities can be really, really well used, and not a derogatory position to be in, shall we say, being in a container. They are really good, and I'd like to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hamblin.
Thank you, Chair. I too am wholly in favour of this one. I think the shipping container thing has probably been overdone, but it's certainly, I would have agreed with that. I have a question, in fact. The presenting officer, Mr. Bailey, mentioned and showed us a map at the beginning of the presentation with a red-lined area, which I think he described as the Hereford Heritage Area or something similar. With this falling outside it, I would estimate also that the property at number 3 in the street, which was similarly converted, might fall inside it. Would there be any difference in the way the two properties were treated?
I think I'll get the clerk just to bring up the map, but you're referring to the Hereford Central Conservation Area. So as going through the report, we have made an assessment in terms of whether the proposal is viewed to affect the setting, significance or experience of the conservation area, and that's discussed at section 6.24 through to section 6.26 of the appraisal. In terms of the relationship with number 3, we did make a decision on that application some weeks ago. I don't know if I can I'll just double check quickly in terms of the map. Sorry, I'd rather get it right so I can assure you that we're giving the response. Can I come back to that, Chair? Would that be all right? Yeah.
So, Thomas.
I just want to say from a technical point of view, it is very, very easy to soundproof a house, and it is actually quite modest amount of money to do it. So from that building point of view, it's very easy to do. But I'm in favour of it.
Right. Are there any other? Councillor Engel.
I've just got a couple of questions, if I may, because I'm about the container or not container. I'm rather concerned about what the politicians call the optics of this. This is quite a high-profile street. You've got the university, you've got the shopping centre, you've got Waitrose, you've got the football team, who probably won't, but possibly will be playing in a higher division next year, and if the crowds build to say, look where Hereford puts people, I would be rather concerned. So, what can I ask? Can I ask what it's actually going to look like from the outside? I accept what you say about the inside, but what's it going to look like to a passerby? Is it going to look like a container or a small house?
Mr. Bailey.
I'll come back to Councillor Hamblin's point first of all. So in terms of the application concerning number 3, again, it is outside of the conservation area, but the officer assessment did again consider the setting, significance and experience of the conservation area. So the red line, you can have a look on the council's website, but essentially the Blackfriars Street Road essentially is the boundary for the conservation area. But that's on the council's website, so you can check in that regard. In response to Councillor Engel's question, I did put a photograph of the modular building at Simmons Street that you may have seen in a previous application. What I might suggest, Chairman, I know I have suggested the condition in terms of amending the floor plan to that effect. And if it's all right with the proposer and seconder, it may be appropriate to include the wording of an updated drawing in terms of the proposed elevations of the proposed pod before it is formally brought onto site. I think that probably would provide some assurance to hopefully the proposer and seconder and the concerns of the councillor in that regard. And I think it then ensures that the accommodation that is going to be brought forward, if approved, is of a suitable standard in terms of townscape and visual impacts and all other material planning considerations. That obviously needs to come through the proposer and seconder, but that might be a best way forward in that regard.
Right.
Which is on the other matter of Mr. Rowe's objection. I think it seems a little unclear of where of who is actually in charge of these buildings if there is a problem, and it certainly seemed as though he had not had the opportunity to deal with that then. Sort of bear in mind all these points, but just to put him at ease, could somebody tell him who he should complain to if there is a problem, which we all hope there isn't?
Yeah,
Ms.
okay.
Gibbons.
Yeah, so the applicant's obviously in the room, and we'll take that away, I'm sure. But they did, Ms. McSherry did say that they were hoping to work with a registered provider, so that person would probably take responsibility. But we can pass that message back to the applicant to ask them to provide contact details at a later stage once that's been resolved.
Yes, I have to disagree, loath as I am with Councillor Engel. I've never thought that particular area was one of the architectural gems in the crown of Hereford City. The Premier Inn, the housing, the retail development, etc., and the electricity.
But can I just say that Councillor Baker wasn't the only one who thought actually that the house was pretty well constructed and not unattractive.
The house in itself, yes, but the surrounding, I don't think I would.
But it's.
I can't imagine Middlesbrough fans turning up and saying, breathing in, what a wonderful sort of.
I said high profile, not beautiful.
Right. Any other speaker? Councillor Baker.
Can I just mention, Councillor Woodall's got a picture of the existing container on his screen, and it's painted white. And I'm just wondering whether or not the one that we're going to hopefully approve on this particular site, how will it be painted on the outside? Will it be, I don't know, not camouflage, but I'm just thinking of a bit of artistic license. It could be made to look half decent, I would have thought.
The plans do say grey, but I think, as I have suggested, that the word, if we amend the additional condition in terms of the revised elevation and that the appearance of the cladding or whatever materials that they decide to use in terms of colour finish is agreed in writing before it's brought onto site. I think that would. I think what you're referring to is the modular building down on Simmons Street. That's the one I have put in this schedule of updates. Yes, but I think that it probably needs to come from the proposer and seconder accordingly. But that would probably be the best way forward.
Is that agreed? Yep. Because it's great. Councillor Waddle. Yes. Right. Any other speakers? Our legal officer say something.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jenner, just note that when you stated that this type of application was close to your heart, can I just ask you to confirm that you approached the matter with an open mind and that you've considered this particular application on its own merits, please? Thank you.
I can confirm that I have approached this with an open mind and consider this application on its own merits.
What's that? Right, are there any other speakers? Then we have a proposal before us, which has been proposed and seconded. Can I ask those in favour, please indicate. I think that's unanimous. Thank you all for your attendance and safety. Thank you.